Bessie Mae Callahan's hands shook as she stuffed her belongings into a carpet bag, blood trickling from the cut on her lip where Hank Morrison had struck her. The saloon kitchen still echoed with his words. "You should be grateful I let a fat cow like you work here." She was done being grateful, done being small, done being nothing. At 32 years old, she was running into the Wyoming mountains with no plan except survival. Welcome to a story of courage found in the darkest places. Follow Bessie's journey to the very end. Hit that subscribe button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The back door of the Golden Spur Saloon creaked open just past midnight. Bessie pressed herself against the wall, listening for footsteps, but the only sound was piano music drifting from the front room and the thunder of her own heartbeat. She had maybe 10 minutes before Hank noticed she was gone. Her carpet bag was heavy, stuffed with everything she owned. 2 dresses, her mother's cookbook, a small pouch of coins she'd hidden for 3 years. Not much to show for a lifetime, but it would have to be enough. Going somewhere? Bessie's blood turned to ice. Ruby Johnson stepped out from behind the woodpile, her red hair catching moonlight, her pregnant belly straining against her dress. The former saloon girl looked as desperate as Bessie felt. "Ruby, I can't. I have to go, now." "I know." Ruby moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Take me with you." "What?" "Hank threw me out this morning. Said a pregnant whore ain't good for business." Ruby's hand went to her stomach. "I got nowhere to go, Bess. The doc won't see me. The boarding house turned me away. I've been hiding in the alley all day." Bessie looked at the younger woman, at the bruises on her arms that matched the ones Bessie hid under her sleeves. They were both disposable to this town, both worth less than nothing. "I don't even know where I'm going," Bessie admitted. "Don't matter. Anywhere is better than here." A crash from inside the saloon made them both flinch. Hank's voice bellowed something about lazy workers and cold food. "We go now," Bessie said, grabbing Ruby's hand. "We go right now." They moved through the shadows of Copper Ridge like ghosts, past the general store where the owner's wife had called Bessie that unfortunate large woman, past the doctor's office where Dr. Price had told her to simply eat less and her joint pain would disappear, past the church where the preacher had suggested her size was evidence of moral weakness. Every building held a memory of humiliation. "Where are we headed?" Ruby whispered. "The mountain. There's a man lives up there, Josiah Weston." Ruby stopped walking. "The one with the scar?" "Bess, folks say he's touched in the head. Say he talks to himself, keeps to himself. Ain't spoken more than 10 words to anyone in 6 years." "Folks say a lot of things," Bessie kept moving, forcing Ruby to follow. "They say I'm lazy, and that's why I'm fat. They say you're sinful, and that's why you're pregnant. Maybe folks don't know everything. But why him?" Bessie paused, her swollen ankles throbbing with every heartbeat. The inflammation in her joints had gotten worse these past months. Some days she could barely walk. Dr. Price had refused to give her anything for the pain, insisting her weight was the problem, and any treatment would be enabling her condition. "Because Mary Whitehorse told me he knows medicine. Real medicine, not the kind that comes with judgment and shame. She said he helped her nephew when no white doctor would touch him." "The Indian woman?" "Lakota," Bessie corrected firmly. "She sells herbs at the edge of town. She's the only person in Copper Ridge who ever looked at me like I was human." They reached the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open land, and the mountains rose black against the star-filled sky. The trail up would take hours, and Bessie's legs already burned with the effort of walking this far. But she'd rather die on that mountain than spend one more night under Hank Morrison's roof. "I need to rest," Ruby said, her breathing labored. "Just for a minute." They stopped beneath a cottonwood tree, both women exhausted before their journey had truly begun. Bessie looked back at Copper Ridge, at the lights flickering in windows, at the life she was leaving behind. No one would miss her. That thought should have hurt, but instead, it felt like freedom. "Bess?" Ruby's voice was small in the darkness. "What if he turns us away? The mountain man. What if he's like all the others?" "Then we keep going. We find somewhere else." Bessie hauled herself to her feet, ignoring the sharp pain in her knees. "But we don't go back. Not ever, you understand?" Ruby nodded, and they started walking again. The trail up the mountain was steep and unforgiving. Within an hour, Bessie was drenched in sweat despite the cool night air. Her dress clung to her body, fabric pulling at flesh she'd spent her whole life trying to hide. Every step sent fire through her joints, but she kept moving. She thought about her father's ranch in Texas, the one she'd grown up on, the one that should have been hers. She thought about her stepmother's cold eyes when she'd announced that Bessie would be leaving. "No man will marry you," Cordelia had said. "You're nothing but a burden to this family. Your father was too soft to say it, but I'm not." Burden. The word had followed her from Texas to Wyoming, from job to job, from humiliation to humiliation. "I can't," Ruby collapsed against a boulder, her face pale in the moonlight. "Bess, I can't go no further. My feet are swelling something awful." Bessie knelt beside her, checking the younger woman's ankles. They were indeed swollen, dangerously so. "How far along are you, really?" 7 months, maybe 8. Ruby's eyes filled with tears. "The father, he was a cattle buyer passing through. Said he'd come back for me. Said we'd get married and go to California." She laughed bitterly. "I was stupid enough to believe him." "You weren't stupid. You were hopeful. There's a difference." "Is there?" Bessie didn't have an answer. She looked up the trail, trying to gauge how much further they had to go. The sky was beginning to lighten at the edges. Dawn would come soon, and with it, the possibility of being found. "I'll carry your bag," Bessie said. "We go slow, but we go." "You can barely walk yourself." "Then we'll barely walk together." They continued their climb as the sun rose over the Wyoming mountains. Bessie's world narrowed to the next step, then the next, then the next. Pain became background noise, something to be endured rather than acknowledged. She'd had plenty of practice at that. By mid-morning, Ruby was leaning heavily on Bessie's arm, both women trembling with exhaustion. The trail had leveled out somewhat, winding through pine trees that filtered the sunlight into golden patches. "There," Ruby pointed with a shaking hand. "Is that it?" Through the trees, Bessie could see a cabin. Rough-hewn logs, stone chimney, a small barn nearby. Horses grazed in a fenced pasture. It looked peaceful. It looked like safety. It looked like everything Copper Ridge had never been. "Stay here," Bessie said, lowering Ruby onto a fallen log. "Let me talk to him first." "Bess, don't leave me." "I'm not leaving you. I'm making sure it's safe." She squeezed Ruby's hand. "If something goes wrong, if he's dangerous, you run. You hear me? You run back down that mountain and you find Mary Whitehorse. She'll help you." Ruby nodded, fear bright in her eyes. Bessie walked toward the cabin alone, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to find another way, to not put herself at the mercy of yet another person who could hurt her. But there was no other way. And sometimes, survival meant taking risks. She was halfway across the clearing when the cabin door opened. The man who emerged was not what she'd expected. The stories had painted him as wild, half-mad, a hermit who'd lost his grip on sanity. But the person who stepped onto the porch was clean, his dark hair tied back, his clothes worn but well-maintained. Then she saw the scar. It ran from his forehead down across his left cheek, angry and puckered, impossible to ignore. His eyes met hers, and she saw something flicker in them. Recognition? No. Wariness. the wariness of someone who'd learned that people rarely brought good news. "Ma'am?" His voice was low, rough from disuse. "You're a long way from town." "Mr. Weston?" She hated how her voice shook. "That's right. My name is Bessie Callahan. I need help." He studied her for a long moment, his gaze moving over her sweat-soaked dress, her swollen ankles, the carpet bag clutched in her white-knuckled grip. She waited for the familiar look of disgust, the curl of the lip, the dismissive comment about her size. It didn't come. "You're hurt," he said instead. I'm fine." "No, you ain't." He stepped off the porch, moving toward her with a limp she hadn't noticed before. "Your ankles are swollen bad enough I can see it from here, and you're favoring your left side like every step's causing you pain." Bessie felt tears spring to her eyes. When was the last time someone had actually looked at her, really looked, beyond the fat and the shame, to see that she was suffering? "Please," she whispered. "I can pay. I don't have much, but I can cook, I can clean, I can work. I just need somewhere to stay. Somewhere safe." Safe from what? The question hung between them. Bessie thought about lying, about making up some story that would sound less pathetic than the truth. But she was too tired for lies. From everyone. Josiah Weston was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. "You ain't alone." It wasn't a question. Bessie's breath caught. "How did you know?" "I can see her through the trees. Pregnant woman, red hair. She looks worse off than you." He turned back toward the cabin. "Bring her in. Both of you need to rest before anything else." "Just like that? You don't even know us." He paused at the door, looking back at her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "I know enough. I know you climbed a mountain in the dark with bad legs and a friend who can barely walk. I know you're scared enough to come to a stranger rather than stay where you were." His jaw tightened. "And I know what it's like to be turned away when you need help most." He disappeared inside, leaving the door open behind him. Bessie stood frozen for a moment, unable to process what had just happened. No judgment, no cruelty, no demands for explanation or proof of worthiness. Just open the door, come in, rest. She walked back to Ruby on shaking legs. "Well?" Ruby's voice was barely above a whisper. "He said to come in. Both of us." "Just like that?" Bessie helped Ruby to her feet, supporting the younger woman's weight against her own aching body. "Just like that." The cabin was larger inside than it appeared, clean and organized in a way that surprised Bessie. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jars and bottles and bundles of dried plants. A fire burned low in the stone fireplace, and the smell of coffee drifted through the air. Josiah had already pulled 2 chairs near the hearth. "Sit," he said, the word more command than request. "I'll make something for those ankles." Ruby collapsed into one of the chairs, her eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. Bessie sat more slowly, wincing as the pressure came off her swollen joints. "You're a healer?" she asked, watching him move to the shelves and select various dried herbs. "I know some things." He didn't look at her as he worked. "Learned from a Lakota woman years back. She knew more about medicine than any doctor I ever met." "Mary Whitehorse?" Now he did look up, surprise flickering across his scarred face. "You know Mary?" "She's the one who told me about you. Said you helped people the regular doctors wouldn't touch." Josiah was quiet as he crushed herbs in a stone mortar. When he spoke again, his voice was harder. "The regular doctors wouldn't touch you?" "Dr. Price said my pain was caused by my weight. Said if I just tried harder to be thin, I wouldn't hurt anymore." Bessie heard the bitterness in her own voice and didn't try to hide it. "He wouldn't give me anything for the inflammation. Said it would be enabling my condition. Your condition, Josiah repeated flatly. Being fat. That's my condition, apparently. Everything else is just a consequence of my moral failings. She expected him to agree. Everyone always did, even if they were too polite to say it out loud. Instead, Josiah set down the mortar and turned to face her fully. That man's a fool. Bessie blinked. I'm sorry? Dr. Price. He's a fool. Josiah's eyes were intense, almost angry. What you've got in your joints, that ain't caused by weight. I've seen thin people with the same inflammation, same swelling, same pain. It's the body attacking itself, fighting something it can't find. Weight might make it harder to move, but it ain't the cause. Ruby spoke up from her chair, her voice small. How do you know? Because my wife had it. The words came out rough, like they'd been dragged from somewhere deep. She was thin as a rail, and she had the same swollen joints, the same constant pain. The doctors told her she was imagining things, that women were prone to hysteria. His hands clenched at his sides. She died believing she was crazy, that the pain wasn't real. The cabin fell silent. Bessie saw something in Josiah's face that she recognized. Not just grief, but guilt. The kind of guilt that ate a person from the inside. I'm sorry, she said softly. Don't be sorry. Just understand something. He picked up the mortar again, resuming his work with movements that were slightly less steady than before. You ain't sick because you're fat. You ain't in pain because you haven't tried hard enough. Your body is fighting a war, and it needs help, not judgment. Tears spilled down Bessie's cheeks before she could stop them. She pressed her hands to her face, mortified to be crying in front of this stranger, but unable to stop the flood of emotion that his words had released. No one had ever said that to her. No one had ever suggested that her pain was real, that her body wasn't her enemy, that she might be worthy of actual help. Here, a rough cloth appeared in her vision. Josiah was holding it out to her, his face carefully neutral. Ain't nothing to be ashamed of. She took the cloth, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry. I don't usually... I'm not weak. Never said you were. A woman who climbs a mountain on legs that hurt with every step ain't weak. He turned back to his work. She's stubborn as hell, maybe, but not weak. Despite everything, Bessie felt a small laugh escape her. My father used to say I was too stubborn for my own good. Sounds like your father knew you. He did. He was a good man. The grief was old now, worn smooth by time, but it still ached. He died 2 years ago, left everything to my stepmother. She made it clear there wasn't room for me anymore. Brothers? Sisters? A brother, Thomas. He was working on a ranch up north when our father passed. By the time he got home, Cordelia had already arranged for me to leave. Bessie's hands twisted in her lap. I don't blame him. He was young, and she's very convincing. She told him I wanted to go, that I'd found a job somewhere better. By the time he learned the truth, I was already in Wyoming. Ruby spoke up again, her voice stronger, now that some color had returned to her face. And you ended up at the Golden Spur? Only place that would hire me. Hank Morrison doesn't care what his workers look like, as long as they work cheap and don't complain. Bessie's jaw tightened. I should have left months ago, but I had nowhere to go, and I thought maybe if I just kept my head down. He hit you. Josiah's voice was flat. Bessie's hand went instinctively to her split lip. She'd almost forgotten about it in the chaos of the night. How did you... I've seen what a man's fist does to a woman's face. He set the mortar down with more force than necessary. I've seen it too many times. He wanted me to be nice to the customers. The words came out dull, mechanical. When I wouldn't, he said I should be grateful anyone gave me a job at all. Said no one else would want a fat cow like me. Then he showed me what would happen if I didn't cooperate." Ruby made a small sound of distress. She knew. She'd experienced her own version of Hank Morrison's persuasion. Josiah was very still. When he spoke, his voice was controlled, but Bessie could hear the anger underneath. "He ever comes up this mountain, I'll show him what happens to men who hit women." "He won't come. He probably hasn't even noticed I'm gone yet." Bessie tried to sound confident, but doubt crept into her voice. "We're not worth the trouble." "Everyone's worth trouble to someone." Josiah brought over a basin of warm water and knelt in front of her chair. "Give me your feet." Bessie froze.
What?
"Your ankles need soaking. The herbs will help with the swelling and the pain." He looked up at her, and his eyes were patient. "I ain't going to hurt you. I ain't going to judge you. I'm going to help you, same as I'd help anyone who showed up at my door needing care." Slowly, her hands trembling, Bessie removed her worn boots and rolled down her stockings. Her ankles were grotesquely swollen, the skin stretched tight and hot to the touch. She'd hidden them for so long, refused to let anyone see the evidence of her body's betrayal. Josiah didn't flinch. He simply guided her feet into the warm water, and the relief was immediate. Bessie gasped as the herbal mixture began to work, the burning pain fading to a dull ache. "Better?" he asked. "Yes." The word came out as a sob. "Yes, thank you." He nodded and rose to his feet. "You'll soak for 20 minutes, then I'll wrap them properly. In the morning, we'll talk about what comes next." "What comes next?" "You staying, learning to heal. Finding out what you want your life to be now that you've stopped letting other people decide for you." He moved to Ruby, checking her pulse and examining her swollen ankles with the same clinical gentleness. "Both of you are welcome here as long as you need. No conditions, no expectations. Just a place to rest and heal." Ruby started crying then, quiet tears streaming down her face. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you helping us? You don't know us. We could be anybody." Josiah was quiet for a long moment. When he answered, his voice was rough with old pain. "Because 6 years ago, I lost everything. My wife, my daughter, our home. And when I was ready to give up, to lie down and die, a stranger helped me. An old Lakota woman who didn't know me from Adam. She said kindness don't need a reason. It just needs to exist." He looked at both women, his scarred face softened by firelight. "I ain't been able to repay what she gave me, but I can pass it forward." Bessie thought about all the people who had looked at her and seen only her size, all the doors that had closed in her face, all the times she'd been told she was worth less because she took up more space. And here was this man, this scarred and wounded man, who looked at her and saw someone worth helping. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Wait until you've tasted my cooking. Then you might take it back." Despite everything, Ruby laughed. It was a small sound, broken and watery, but it was real. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Bessie felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. The first week on the mountain passed in a rhythm Bessie had never known before. She woke each morning to the sound of Josiah moving through the cabin, building up the fire, starting coffee. The smell would drift under her door, rich and dark. Nothing like the weak brew she'd made at the saloon. She was learning to walk again. Not physically, though the herbal treatments had reduced the swelling in her ankles to something almost bearable. No, she was learning to walk through the world without apologizing for existing, without making herself small, without waiting for the next blow. It was harder than climbing the mountain had been. "You're up early?" Josiah's voice came from the stove where he was attempting to cook eggs. Attempting being the key word. Bessie watched him for a moment, wincing as he cracked another egg directly onto the too-hot pan. "You're burning them." "I know. You've been burning them every morning." "I know that too." She pushed herself out of her chair, ignoring the protest of her joints, and crossed to the stove. "Move." He stepped aside without argument, and Bessie took over. Her hands remembered what to do even when the rest of her felt lost. Lower the heat. Add a bit of butter. Gentle movements. Patient time. "Where'd you learn to cook?" Josiah asked, watching her work. "My mother, before she died." Bessie kept her eyes on the pan. She was the best cook in 3 counties. Everyone said so. She used to tell me that feeding people was its own kind of love. "She sounds like a good woman." She was. The eggs were perfect now, golden and soft. Bessie divided them onto 3 plates. "My stepmother couldn't boil water without ruining it, but she had other talents. Looking beautiful, making my father feel important, convincing him that his fat daughter was an embarrassment to the family name." "Bess?" Ruby's voice came from the doorway. The younger woman looked better today, some color back in her cheeks. "You don't have to talk about that." "Maybe I do." Bessie set the plates on the table with more force than necessary. "Maybe I've been quiet too long. Maybe that's part of the problem." They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Josiah set down his fork and looked at Bessie with an expression she couldn't quite read. "These are the best eggs I've had in 6 years. They're just eggs." "No, they ain't." He leaned back in his chair. "I've been eating my own cooking for 6 years, and I can tell you with certainty that it ain't just eggs. It's something else. Something I don't have words for." Ruby nodded enthusiastically. "He's right. This is what my mama used to make me feel like. Safe." Bessie felt heat rise to her cheeks. Compliments were foreign territory, dangerous ground where traps might hide. "I was a cook at the saloon. It's not special." "You were wasted at that saloon." Josiah's voice was flat. "A woman who cooks like this, she ought to have her own place, her own kitchen, people lining up to taste what she makes." "Women don't own restaurants." "Women don't do a lot of things until they do." He stood, gathering the plates. "I'll wash. You rest your feet." "I can wash my own." "I know you can, but you ain't going to." He carried the plates away, ending the argument. Ruby waited until he was out of earshot, then leaned close to Bessie. "He likes you." "Don't be ridiculous." "I ain't being ridiculous. I've been watching men my whole life. I know what it looks like when one of them is interested." Ruby's eyes sparkled with mischief. "And that man is definitely interested." "He's being kind, that's all." "Honey, kind don't look at you like that." Bessie opened her mouth to argue, but a knock at the door silenced them both. Josiah was already moving, his hand going to the rifle mounted above the fireplace. "Stay here," he said quietly. "Both of you." He opened the door just wide enough to see who was outside, his body blocking the entrance. "Josiah Weston." The voice was old, female, and carried a tone of amused authority. "You going to make an old woman stand out here all day?" The tension drained from Josiah's shoulders. He stepped back, opening the door wide. "Mary, I wasn't expecting you." The woman who entered was small and weathered, her gray hair braided down her back, her face a map of years and wisdom. Her dark eyes swept the room, taking in Ruby by the fire, and Bessie, frozen at the table. "I heard you had guests." Mary Whitehorse's gaze settled on Bessie. "You're the one from the saloon. The cook." Bessie nodded, unable to find words. "Good. I brought herbs you'll need." Mary set a leather bag on the table and turned to Josiah. "You've been treating her joints?" "Best I can." "Show me." What followed was the strangest medical examination Bessie had ever experienced. Mary's hands were gentle but thorough, pressing here, testing there, asking questions that went far beyond anything Dr. Price had ever bothered with. "How long have you hurt?" "Years. Since I was maybe 20. "And it got worse when?" Bessie thought about it. "After my mother died. And again after my father passed." Mary nodded as if this confirmed something. "The body keeps score of grief, holds it in the joints, the muscles, the places we try to hide." She looked at Josiah. "You were right about the treatment, but you're missing something." "What?" "Hope." Mary's eyes returned to Bessie. "All the medicine in the world can't heal someone who's given up on living. You've been surviving for years, girl. Time to start something different." "I don't know how." "Then learn." Mary reached into her bag and pulled out a bundle of dried plants. "This is willow bark. Good for inflammation. This is chamomile. Helps with sleep and anxiety. This one," she held up a small root, "is for the spirit. Burns low and steady. Keeps the darkness at bay." "You're giving these to me?" "I'm teaching you. There's a difference." Mary began laying out the herbs on the table. "Josiah learned from me when he came to this mountain broken and half dead. Now he helps others. You'll do the same. I'm not a healer, not yet, but your hands know how to take care of people. I've seen the food you made these two." Mary gestured at Josiah and Ruby. "Same skill, different application. You'll learn." Ruby spoke up from her chair by the fire. Can you help with the baby too? I ain't got nobody to tell me what to do when it comes." Mary's expression softened. "How far along?" 7, maybe 8 months. "Come here, child." Ruby waddled over, and Mary examined her with the same thorough gentleness she'd shown Bessie. Her hands pressed against the swollen belly, feeling for something only she could perceive. "Baby sitting high. That's good. Strong heartbeat." Mary paused, her brow furrowing. "But you've been starving yourself." "I ain't had much choice." "I know. We'll fix it." Mary looked at Josiah. "She needs red meat. Liver if you can get it. Greens, beans, anything with iron. The baby's taking everything she's got. I'll hunt tomorrow." "Good." Mary straightened up and looked around the cabin, at the 3 broken people who'd somehow found each other. "You've built something here, Josiah, whether you meant to or not." "I ain't built nothing. They just needed help." "And you gave it. That's building." Mary picked up her bag. "I'll be back in a week. Keep Bessie's feet wrapped. Make sure Ruby eats. And for God's sake," she fixed Josiah with a stern look, "let these women take care of you too. You've been alone too long." "Mary." "Don't argue with me, boy. I changed your bandages when you were too sick to lift your head. I've earned the right to tell you what's good for you." She was gone before he could respond, leaving a wake of silence behind her. Ruby broke it first. "I like her." "Everyone likes Mary." Josiah's voice was gruff. "Even when she's being impossible." "What did she mean?" Bessie asked quietly. "About changing your bandages?" Josiah was still for a long moment. Then he sat down heavily in the chair across from her, his scarred face turned toward the fire. 6 years ago, I had a family. A wife named Sarah. A daughter named Emma. She was 5 years old. His voice was flat, controlled. "We had a ranch about a day's ride from here. Nothing fancy, but it was ours." Bessie waited, not daring to speak. "I was out checking fence lines when the fire started. By the time I saw the smoke, it was too late." His hands clenched on his knees. "I rode hard, got there fast as I could. The whole house was burning. I went in anyway." "The scar," Ruby whispered. "I found Sarah first. She was already gone. The smoke got her before the flames did." Josiah's voice cracked, just for a moment. "Emma was in her room. I could hear her screaming. I tried to get to her, but the roof it came down between us. I couldn't reach her." "Oh, God." Bessie's hand covered her mouth. "I don't remember much after that. Mary says I walked out of that house on fire, says I collapsed in the yard, and would have died right there if her nephew hadn't been passing through. He touched his scarred cheek absently. Took me 3 months to heal enough to move. Another 3 before I could think straight. By then, there was nothing left to go back to. It wasn't your fault, wasn't it? His eyes met hers, and she saw the guilt there, deep and festering. I should have been home. Should have been there to protect them. Instead, I was out checking goddamn fence posts, while my family burned. You couldn't have known. Doesn't matter. They're still dead. He stood abruptly, turning away. I came to this mountain because I couldn't face anyone who knew me. Couldn't face the pity or the whispers. And I stayed because I figured I deserved to be alone. No one deserves that. Maybe. Maybe not. He moved toward the door. I'm going to check the horses. You two rest. He was gone before either woman could stop him. Ruby moved to sit beside Bessie, taking her hand. That poor man. He's been carrying that for 6 years. Alone. Not anymore. Ruby squeezed her hand. We're here now. Maybe that's why this happened. Maybe God or fate or whatever you want to call it brought us all together for a reason. I don't believe in fate. Neither did I until a few days ago. Ruby's free hand went to her belly. But I'm starting to think maybe I was wrong about a lot of things. That night, Bessie couldn't sleep. She lay in her small bed, listening to the wind outside and thinking about everything she'd learned. About Mary's herbs and Josiah's grief, and the strange feeling growing in her chest that she might actually belong somewhere. Then she heard it. A sound from Josiah's room. Not speech exactly, but not quite a scream either. Something in between. Something tortured. She was out of bed before she could think, crossing the dark cabin in her bare feet. Ruby appeared in her own doorway, eyes wide with alarm. "Stay here," Bessie whispered. She pushed open Josiah's door. He was thrashing in his bed, caught in some nightmare she couldn't see. His face was twisted with anguish, and even in the darkness, she could see tears streaming down his scarred cheek. "Emma!" The name tore out of him. "Emma, hold on! Daddy's coming! Daddy's—" "Josiah!" Bessie moved to the bedside, her heart breaking. "Josiah, wake up!" He didn't hear her. He was lost in the fire, trapped in that burning house with a daughter he couldn't save. "Josiah!" She grabbed his shoulder, shaking hard. His eyes flew open. For one terrible moment, he didn't see her. He saw smoke and flames and his daughter's face. Then recognition flooded in, and the anguish that followed was worse than anything Bessie had ever witnessed. "She was calling for me." His voice was raw, shattered. "She was calling for her daddy, and I couldn't get to her. I couldn't." He broke. The strong, steady man who'd taken them in without question, who'd treated their wounds and asked for nothing in return. He broke right there in front of her, sobbing like his heart had finally given up trying to hold itself together. Bessie did the only thing she could think of. She sat on the edge of the bed and pulled him into her arms. He resisted for half a second. Then he collapsed against her, his face buried in her shoulder, his body shaking with 6 years of grief that had never been allowed to escape. "I know," she murmured, stroking his hair. "I know. Let it out. I've got you." She held him through the worst of it, through the sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his chest, through the fragments of words that were sometimes his daughter's name, and sometimes just sounds of pain. Ruby appeared in the doorway, her face wet with sympathetic tears, but she didn't enter. She just stood guard, bearing witness to something sacred. Eventually, the storm passed. Josiah's breathing steadied, though he didn't pull away from Bessie's arms. "I'm sorry." His voice was hoarse, muffled against her shoulder. "You shouldn't have to see that." "Why not?" Because I'm supposed to be strong. I'm supposed to be helping you, not falling apart. Bessie pulled back just enough to look at his face. Even tear-stained and ravaged by grief, he was the most real person she'd ever met. You think being strong means never breaking down? She touched his scarred cheek gently. That's not strength. That's just hiding. And I reckon both of us have done enough hiding to last a lifetime. He stared at her, something shifting in his dark eyes. How do you do that? Do what? Say exactly what I need to hear, like you can see right through me. Maybe because I know what it's like to carry something too heavy alone. She smiled sadly. Maybe because I recognize the weight. They sat in silence for a long moment, closer than strangers should be, closer than either had been to anyone in years. Stay, Josiah said finally. Please, just stay here tonight. I don't want to be alone. Okay. Bessie shifted to sit against the headboard, and Josiah lay back down, his head resting near her hip. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't anything either of them had words for. It was just two broken people refusing to let each other drown. Ruby crept away quietly, leaving them to their fragile peace. When morning came, they didn't speak of it. But something had changed. Some wall had come down, and neither of them tried to rebuild it. 3 days later, trouble found them. Bessie was hanging laundry outside when she heard the horses. 3 riders coming up the trail, moving fast. Josiah! She dropped the wet shirt and ran for the cabin. Someone's coming! He emerged with his rifle before she reached the door. Get inside, both of you. But it was too late to hide. The riders had crested the hill and were already in sight. Bessie recognized one of them immediately. Jake Sullivan, one of Hank Morrison's regular customers. The kind of man who paid for drinks with his hands where they didn't belong. Well, well, Jake reined in his horse, an ugly grin spreading across his face. So the rumors are true. Old Scarface really is keeping women up here. Josiah stepped forward, putting himself between the riders and the cabin. You're on my land, Sullivan. State your business and get out. My business is them, Jake pointed at Bessie, who'd frozen halfway to the door. Hank's been looking for his cook. Says she owes him 3 weeks' wages for running out on her contract. I didn't have a contract. Your word against his, and Hank's got a lot of friends in town. Jake's eyes traveled over her body with the kind of look that made her skin crawl. Of course, he might be willing to forget the whole thing if you come back nice and quiet. Work off what you owe. One way or another. Ruby appeared in the doorway, her pregnant belly visible beneath her dress. Leave her alone. Lord Almighty, Jake laughed. The whore's here too? Hank's gonna love this. Says the town council's been asking questions about moral decay and improper living arrangements. A scarred hermit hiding 2 fallen women on his mountain. He clicked his tongue. That's going to be quite the scandal. The only scandal here is your lack of manners. Josiah's voice was cold as winter. Now, I'm going to give you one chance to turn those horses around and ride back the way you came. Or what? Or I'll put a bullet between your eyes and tell the sheriff you tried to assault 2 women under my protection. Josiah raised the rifle, sighting down the barrel. Your choice. The other 2 riders exchanged nervous glances, but Jake's grin only widened. You're bluffing. Try me. The moment stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Bessie couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only watch as 2 men measured each other across a distance that felt both infinite and far too close. Jake broke first. Fine, have it your way. He yanked his horse's head around. But this ain't over, Scarface. Hank Morrison don't forget when people take what's his. And the town don't take kindly the men who keep women against their will. They're not being kept. They're being protected. There's a difference. Is there? We'll see what the law has to say about that. He spurred his horse down the trail, the other riders following. Bessie watched them until they disappeared into the trees, her heart still hammering against her ribs. "He'll be back," Ruby's voice shook. "With more men. With the sheriff." Probably. Josiah lowered the rifle, but his body stayed tense. "We've got maybe a week before they work up the nerve."
"What do we do?"
He was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to look at both of them, and Bessie saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Determination. Purpose. Fire. "We get ready," he said. "And when they come, we show them exactly what happens when you corner people who've got nothing left to lose." The week that followed Jake Sullivan's visit was the longest of Bessie's life. Every creak of wind, every snap of a twig made her heart jump into her throat. She caught herself watching the trail constantly, waiting for the storm she knew was coming. Josiah prepared in his own way, silent, methodical. He cleaned every weapon in the cabin, reinforced the door, showed both women where to hide if things went bad. "You really think they'll come with guns?" Ruby asked one evening, her hands pressed protectively against her belly. "I think Hank Morrison's pride got hurt when Bessie ran." Josiah loaded bullets into his rifle with practiced ease. Men like that, they don't let things go, especially when a woman's the one who walked away. "I should leave." Bessie's voice was barely a whisper. "If I go, they'll have no reason to bother you." "Where would you go?" "I don't know. Somewhere. Anywhere." "And Ruby?" Bessie looked at the younger woman, at her swollen belly and frightened eyes. "She could stay. They're not looking for her." "They're looking for scandal." Josiah set down the rifle. "A pregnant woman, unmarried, living with a man who ain't her husband. That's enough for them to make trouble, even without you." "So what do we do?" "We stand. We fight if we have to." He met her eyes. "And we don't let them make us feel ashamed of surviving." The confrontation came 4 days later, just after dawn. Bessie was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast, when she heard the horses. Not 3 this time. More. Many more. "Josiah!" She dropped the spoon, batter splattering across the floor. He was already at the window, rifle in hand. His face went hard as stone. "How many?" Ruby's voice shook. 8, maybe 10. He turned to look at them both. "Get in the back room. Don't come out until I tell you." "No." The word came out of Bessie's mouth before she could stop it. "Bessie, this ain't the time to argue." "I'm not arguing. I'm refusing." She wiped her hands on her apron with fingers that trembled. "I spent my whole life hiding in back rooms, making myself small, hoping if I was quiet enough, the bad things would pass me by. It never worked. They always found me anyway." "This is different. These men could hurt you." "They've already hurt me. Every day for years." She moved toward the door. "I'm done hiding, Josiah. Whatever happens, I face it standing up." His jaw clenched, but something in his eyes shifted. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. "Then stay behind me, and if shooting starts, you get down." They stepped onto the porch together. The riders had stopped at the edge of the clearing, a semicircle of horses and grim-faced men. Bessie recognized most of them from town. Shopkeepers, farmers, the blacksmith's apprentice. Ordinary men who'd probably never done anything truly cruel in their lives. But leaving them was Hank Morrison. And beside Hank, mounted on a fine gray horse, was Dr. Edmund Price. "Mr. Weston," Dr. Price's voice carried across the clearing with practiced authority. "We've come to discuss a matter of community concern." "Didn't know the community was concerned about my mountain." "The community is concerned about 2 women being held against their will by a man of questionable mental stability." Dr. Price's eyes flickered to the scar on Josiah's face. "Surely you understand our position." I understand you rode onto my land without invitation and brought a mob with you. Josiah raised the rifle slightly. What I don't understand is why I shouldn't start shooting. Because you're outnumbered. Hank Morrison spoke for the first time, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction. And because all we want is what's ours. They ain't yours. Bessie Callahan owes me 3 weeks' wages. Hank's eyes found her, and the hatred in them made her stomach turn. She broke contract when she ran. I've got the law on my side. I never signed any contract. Your word against mine, fat girl, Hank smiled. And we both know whose word this town believes. Something snapped inside Bessie. Maybe it was the way he said, fat girl, like her body was an insult. Maybe it was years of swallowed anger finally finding an outlet. Maybe it was just that she'd stopped caring what happened to her as long as she didn't have to be silent anymore. She stepped forward, past Josiah's protective stance, down the porch steps. Bessie! Josiah's voice was sharp with warning. She didn't stop. You want to talk about words, Hank? Her voice rang out clear and strong. Let's talk about the words you said to me in that kitchen. The things you promised would happen if I didn't cooperate with your customers. A murmur ran through the men. Some of them shifted uncomfortably on their horses. Let's talk about the bruises you left on my arms when I said no. Let's talk about that split lip I was wearing when I climbed this mountain. Bessie's hands were shaking, but her voice didn't waver. You want to call me a thief? Fine. Call me whatever you want. But don't you dare pretend this is about wages when we both know what you really wanted from me. She's lying. Hank's face had gone red. She's a desperate, delusional fat woman trying to avoid paying her debts. Am I? Bessie turned to the other men, meeting their eyes one by one. Ask yourselves why I'd climb a mountain in the middle of the night with legs that can barely carry me. Ask yourselves why I'd rather face a stranger's judgment than stay one more day under Hank Morrison's roof. Because you're crazy, Hank spat. Just like the whore you're hiding with. Both of you, living up here with this scarred freak, pretending like you're decent women. Everyone knows what you really are. And what's that? Ruby's voice came from the doorway. She'd ignored Josiah's order to stay hidden, stepping onto the porch with her chin high and her hands on her belly. What are we, Hank? Say it loud so everyone can hear. You're trash, both of you, not worth the trouble you've caused. Trash, Ruby laughed, but there was no humor in it. I was good enough when you were taking my money, good enough when your customers wanted company. But the minute I got pregnant, the minute I became inconvenient, suddenly I'm trash. This is ridiculous, Dr. Price cut in, his voice sharp with impatience. We didn't come here to debate moral philosophy with fallen women. We came to restore order. Order? Bessie turned on him. Is that what you call it when you refuse to treat a patient because of how she looks? I beg your pardon? You told me my joint pain was caused by my weight. You told me if I tried harder to be thin, I wouldn't hurt anymore. Bessie's voice cracked with old anger. You refused to give me medicine. You refused to even examine me properly. And you want to talk about restoring order? Dr. Price's face went pale, then red. I made a medical judgment based on sound principles. You made a judgment based on disgust, on prejudice, on the assumption that fat people don't deserve the same care as everyone else. Now see here, I've been on this mountain for 2 weeks. Bessie stepped closer, and she saw something flicker in the doctor's eyes. Fear, maybe, or shame. Mr. Weston has been treating my condition with herbs and proper care. My swelling is down. My pain is manageable. I can walk without crying for the first time in years. She let that sink in. You couldn't do in months what he did in days, and you have the nerve to call him unstable? The murmur among the men grew louder. Bessie saw doubt creeping into some faces. Jacob Collins, who ran the general store, wouldn't meet her eyes. This changes nothing, Hank's voice was louder now, covering his uncertainty with volume. "The law says a woman can't just run from her obligations. The law says a lot of things." A new voice cut through the chaos, and every head turned. A young man rode into the clearing on a chestnut horse. He was maybe 25, with sandy hair and eyes that looked achingly familiar to Bessie. Her heart stopped. "Thomas?" Her brother swung down from his horse, pushing past the mounted men without a second glance. "Bess, thank God." "How did you— I thought you were in Montana." "I was. Got a letter from Mary Whitehorse." Thomas reached her, pulling her into a fierce embrace. "She told me where to find you. Told me what happened." "You know this woman?" Dr. Price's voice was sharp with suspicion. Thomas turned, and there was cold fury in his face. "This woman is my sister, and unless I'm mistaken, you're the doctor who refused to treat her because she didn't fit your idea of a proper patient." "I don't have to answer to—" "No, you don't. But you might have to answer to the Territorial Medical Board when I file a complaint about discriminatory practices." Thomas's voice carried the easy authority of someone who'd spent time around lawyers. "I've been doing some research on my way here. Turns out there are rules about refusing treatment to patients in need." Dr. Price's face went gray. "As for you," Thomas turned to Hank Morrison, "I've heard stories about your establishment. Stories about how you treat your employees. Stories about what happens to women who refuse your advances." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm thinking the sheriff might be interested in hearing those stories too." "You can't prove anything." "Maybe not, but I can make your life very uncomfortable while people investigate." Thomas stepped forward, and despite being younger and smaller than Hank, he didn't flinch. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn around. You're going to ride back down this mountain, and you're going to forget my sister ever existed." "Or what?" "Or I'll use every dollar our father left to drag you through courts until you're ruined. And before you say anything about his will leaving everything to my stepmother—" Thomas's smile turned sharp. "I've had some lawyers looking into that too. Turns out there are questions about undue influence. Questions about whether our father was of sound mind when he made those changes." Bessie stared at her brother. This wasn't the boy she remembered, the quiet one who'd always done what he was told. This was a man who'd learned to fight. "Thomas," she whispered, "you didn't have to—" "Yes, I did." He squeezed her hand. "I should have done it 2 years ago. I should have questioned Cordelia's story. I should have found you." His voice broke. "I'm sorry, Bess. I'm so sorry I wasn't there." "You're here now." The moment stretched between them, brother and sister reunited after years of separation and lies. Then Hank Morrison laughed. "This is touching, really. A family reunion on Scarface Mountain." He gestured to the men behind him. "But it doesn't change anything. 2 women living with an unmarried man, no chaperone, no respectability. The town council won't stand for it." "Then I'll stay." Everyone turned. Josiah had spoken so rarely during the confrontation that his voice cut through the noise like a knife. "What?" Hank's grin faltered. "I said I'll stay, as chaperone." Josiah moved to stand beside Bessie, and something in his posture had changed. "If propriety's the concern, then we address it proper. I'll sleep in the barn. The women keep the cabin. Anyone wants to check arrangements, they're welcome to." "That's not— You can't just—" "I can, and I am." Josiah's eyes swept the crowd. "Any man here wants to say I'm behaving improper, he can say it to my face, right now." Silence. Absolute, deafening silence. None of them would meet his gaze. "That's what I thought." Josiah moved down the steps to stand directly in front of Hank's horse. "Now I'm going to say this once, Morrison. You come up this mountain again. You bring trouble to these women again. And I won't waste time with words. You understand me?" For a long moment, no one moved. Then Jacob Collins cleared his throat. I think we've made a mistake coming here." "Jake!" Hank's voice was sharp. "No, Hank. I ain't comfortable with this." Collins looked at Bessie with something that might have been shame. "My wife, she always spoke well of Miss Callahan's cooking. Said she was a good woman, dealt a bad hand." He touched his hat. "Ma'am, I apologize for the intrusion." He turned his horse and rode away. One by one, the other men followed. The blacksmith's apprentice, the farmers, the shopkeepers, men who'd come expecting to enforce order and found themselves questioning what order really meant. Until only Hank Morrison and Dr. Price remained. "This isn't over." Hank's voice shook with rage. "You think you've won something, but you haven't. I'll find another way. You'll do nothing." Thomas stepped forward. "Because I'm going to be watching. And the minute you step out of line, I'll be there with lawyers and complaints and enough scandal to bury you." Hank's face contorted with fury. For one terrible moment, Bessie thought he might draw a weapon, might do something desperate and violent. Then he yanked his horse around and galloped down the trail, Dr. Price following close behind. The clearing fell silent. Bessie's legs gave out. She would have fallen if Josiah hadn't caught her, his strong arms wrapping around her, holding her up when she couldn't hold herself. "It's okay." His voice was rough in her ear. "It's over. You did it." "We did it," she whispered. "Bess," Thomas was beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" "I don't know," she laughed, or maybe sobbed. It was hard to tell. "I don't know what I am." Ruby appeared, tears streaming down her face. "You were amazing. Both of you. All of you." They stood there, the four of them, in the aftermath of something that felt like a battle. Bessie couldn't stop shaking, couldn't quite believe what had just happened. She'd stood up. She'd fought back. And she was still standing. That evening, after Thomas had settled his horse in the barn, and Ruby had finally stopped crying, and the sun had set over the mountain, Bessie found Josiah sitting on the porch, alone. "Can't sleep?" she asked, settling beside him. "Never can, after something like that." He stared out at the darkness. Adrenaline takes a while to fade. "Thank you for what you said about sleeping in the barn." "I meant it." "I know." She pulled her shawl tighter. "But you shouldn't have to give up your bed because of us." "I've slept in worse places." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Besides, it ain't permanent. Just until things settle." "Until things settle," Bessie repeated. "And then what?" "Then we figure out what comes next." He turned to look at her, and in the moonlight, his scar seemed less harsh than usual. "What do you want, Bessie? If you could have anything, what would it be?" The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that before. "I used to dream about having my own restaurant," she said slowly. "A place where I could cook for people, where they'd come because the food was good, not because they had nowhere else to go." "That's a good dream." "It's impossible." "Why?" "Because women don't own restaurants. Because I don't have money. Because—" She stopped, hearing herself. "Because I spent so long being told what I couldn't do that I started believing it." "You stood up to a mob today." Josiah's voice was quiet. "You faced down the man who hurt you, and the doctor who abandoned you. You made grown men ashamed of themselves." He reached over, his hand covering hers. "I don't think impossible means what you think it does anymore." His hand was warm, rough from work, real. "What about you?" she asked. "What do you want?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I stopped wanting things when Sarah and Emma died. Seemed safer that way." Wanting just leads to losing. And now? Now? He turned her hand over, tracing the lines of her palm with his finger. Now I'm starting to think maybe I was wrong about that, too. Josiah, you don't have to say anything. He released her hand, pulling back. I know I'm not what you'd choose. The scar, the nightmares, the ghost of a dead family I can't let go of. You deserve better than— Don't! Bessie's voice was sharp. Don't tell me what I deserve. I've had enough of other people deciding what I'm worth. He went still. You want to know what I see when I look at you? She didn't wait for an answer. I see a man who lost everything and still found the strength to help strangers. I see someone who looked at me and didn't see a fat woman or a burden or a problem to be solved. You just saw a person who needed help, and you gave it. No conditions, no expectations. Her voice softened. That's rarer than you know. Bessie. Her name came out rough, almost broken. I'm not saying I know what this is. I'm not saying I have answers. She reached up, touching his scarred cheek gently. I'm just saying maybe we stop worrying about what we deserve and start figuring out what we want. He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing. I want, he said slowly, to stop feeling like I'm just waiting to die. Then stop waiting. His eyes opened, and what she saw there made her breath catch. Stay, he whispered, not in the barn, not as a chaperone. Stay because you want to. Stay because whatever this is, I don't want it to end. I'm not going anywhere. He kissed her. It was gentle, tentative, the kiss of two people who'd forgotten what tenderness felt like. Bessie's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her temples. When they broke apart, both of them were trembling. Well, Ruby's voice came from the doorway, thick with emotion and humor. That's the most romantic thing I've seen in my entire life, and I used to work in a saloon. Bessie laughed, or cried, or both. How long have you been standing there? Long enough. Ruby waddled onto the porch, one hand pressed to her lower back. And as much as I hate to ruin the moment, I think we have a problem. What kind of problem? Ruby's face had gone pale. The kind where my water just broke. Everything happened at once. Josiah was on his feet before Bessie could process Ruby's words. How far apart are the pains? I don't know. Ruby's voice pitched high with panic. I didn't even feel real contractions until just now. I thought it was just the stress from earlier. Get her inside. Josiah was already moving toward the cabin. Thomas, I need you to ride for Mary Whitehorse, fast as you can. Thomas grabbed his coat. Where do I find her? Edge of town, small house with blue shutters. Tell her the baby's coming early, and we need her. Josiah paused at the door. And Thomas, don't let anyone follow you back. Understood. Thomas was gone, the sound of hoofbeats fading into the darkness. Bessie helped Ruby inside, her own heart pounding so hard she could barely think. It's going to be okay. Josiah knows what to do. It's too early. Ruby's face was white. The baby's not supposed to come for another month. Maybe more. What if something's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Babies come when they're ready. You don't know that. You can't know that. Ruby doubled over as a contraction hit, a low moan escaping her lips. Oh, God, that hurts. Josiah had already transformed the main room into something resembling a birthing space. Clean cloths laid out, water heating over the fire. The herbs Mary had left arranged within easy reach. Get her on the bed. His voice was calm, steady, the voice of someone who'd done this before. Bessie, I need you to time the contractions. Count the seconds between them. I don't know how to— You'll learn, fast. He met her eyes. I need you, Bessie. Ruby needs you. Can you do this? Something shifted inside her. The same something that had let her face down Hank Morrison. The same something that had made her speak when silence would have been safer. "Yes. Tell me what to do." The next hour was a blur of pain and fear and desperate focus. Ruby's contractions came faster than they should have, closer together, more intense. Between them, she sobbed and cursed and called for her mother, who'd been dead for 10 years. "Something's wrong." Ruby grabbed Bessie's hand, hard enough to bruise. "I can feel it. Something's wrong with the baby." "The baby's fine." Bessie wiped sweat from Ruby's forehead. "You're doing so well." "Don't lie to me." Ruby's eyes were wild. "I've seen births go bad. I've seen women die. My sister died. My sister—" "You're not your sister." Bessie gripped her hand tighter. "You're here. You're strong, and you've got people fighting for you. That's more than she had." "But if the baby—" "The baby is going to be fine. You're going to be fine. I won't let anything happen to either of you." It was a promise Bessie had no right to make. She knew that, but she made it anyway, because Ruby needed something to hold on to, and hope was all Bessie had to give. Josiah worked with quiet intensity, checking Ruby's progress, preparing instruments Bessie didn't want to look at too closely. His hands were steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the fear he was trying to hide. "How bad is it?" she asked, quietly, when Ruby dozed between contractions. "Baby's positioned wrong. Not breech, but the head's tilted." He kept his voice low. "I've seen it before. It can still be a normal birth, but it's harder. Takes longer." "And if it doesn't turn?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. 2 hours passed, then 3. Ruby grew weaker, her screams fading to whimpers, her grip on Bessie's hand loosening. "I can't." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I can't do this anymore." "Yes, you can." "I'm so tired." "I know, but your baby's almost here. Just a little more." "What if she doesn't love me?" The question came out of nowhere, broken and desperate. "What if she looks at me and sees what everyone else sees? A whore, a fallen woman. What if she's ashamed?" Bessie felt tears burn her eyes. "She's going to look at you and see the bravest woman in the world. She's going to see someone who climbed a mountain to give her a chance, who fought through hours of pain to bring her into the world." She pressed her forehead to Ruby's. "She's going to love you, Ruby. How could she not?" "Promise?" "I promise." The door burst open. Mary Whitehorse strode in, Thomas close behind her, both of them windblown and breathing hard. "How long?" Mary demanded, already moving to examine Ruby. 4 hours, maybe 5. "Baby's position?" "Tilted. I've been trying to turn her, but—" "I know." Mary's hands moved with practiced ease over Ruby's belly. "But we're running out of time. Her strength is fading." She looked at Josiah with sharp eyes. "You know what we need to do." Something passed between them, some understanding Bessie couldn't read. "I'll hold her," Josiah said quietly. "You guide." "What?" Bessie looked between them. "What are you going to do?" "Turn the baby from the outside." Mary was already positioning herself. "It's painful, it's dangerous, but if we don't try, we lose them both." Ruby's eyes flew open. "No, no, please, I can't." "You can." Mary's voice was firm, but kind. "You've come this far. You don't stop now." Josiah moved behind Ruby, supporting her upper body, his arms wrapped around her shoulders. "I've got you. Whatever happens, I've got you." "Bessie," Ruby's hand found hers. "Stay with me." "Always." Mary positioned her hands on Ruby's belly and pressed. The scream that tore from Ruby's throat was unlike anything Bessie had ever heard. Primal, agonized, the sound of a woman being torn apart from the inside. "Hold her still," Mary commanded. Josiah tightened his grip. Bessie held Ruby's hand and murmured words that didn't mean anything, just sounds to fill the space between screams. Almost there. Mary's face was tight with concentration. One more push. One more. Another scream. Another eternity of pain. Then Mary sat back, her expression shifting. It's done. The baby's turned. Ruby collapsed against Josiah, sobbing. Is it over? Please tell me it's over. Not quite. Mary moved back to the foot of the bed. Now you push. I can't. I can't. You can. You will. Bessie's voice was fierce. Look at me, Ruby. Look at me. Ruby's eyes found hers, glazed with pain and exhaustion. You told me once that you wanted to give your baby a better life than you had. Remember? You said you'd do anything to make sure she never felt unwanted. Bessie squeezed her hand. This is anything. This is everything. Now push. Ruby pushed. The next few minutes were chaos. Mary shouting instructions, Josiah holding Ruby steady, Bessie coaching her through each contraction, each push, each moment that felt like it would never end. And then, suddenly, a different sound filled the cabin. A cry. Thin and angry, and absolutely impossibly beautiful. It's a girl. Mary's voice cracked with emotion. A perfect baby girl. Ruby reached for her daughter with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. The baby was small, smaller than she should be, but her lungs worked just fine. She screamed at the injustice of being born into a cold, bright world. She's okay? Ruby's voice was barely a whisper. She's really okay? She's perfect. Mary placed the baby in Ruby's arms. Small, but strong, like her mother. Bessie stood back, watching Ruby meet her daughter for the first time. Something cracked open in her chest. Something she'd kept locked away for years. Hope. Real hope. Not the desperate kind that comes from having nothing else, but the quiet kind that comes from witnessing miracles. Thank you. Ruby looked up at all of them, her face transformed by joy. Thank you. All of you. I don't know how to... You don't have to say anything. Josiah's voice was rough. Just rest. Both of you. Thomas stood in the corner, looking shell-shocked. I didn't know it was like that. Most men don't. Mary began cleaning up, her movements efficient despite her obvious exhaustion. They think babies just appear, don't understand what women go through to bring them. I understand now. Thomas looked at his sister with new eyes. Bess, I'm sorry. For everything. For not being there. For believing Cordelia's lies. For... Not now. Bessie moved to hug him. We've got time for all that later. Right now, just be glad we're all alive. The hours that followed were quiet. Ruby slept with her daughter curled against her chest. Thomas dozed in a chair by the fire. Mary left at dawn, promising to return in a few days to check on the baby. Bessie couldn't sleep. Too much had happened. Too much was still happening inside her. She found Josiah on the porch, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. You saved them, she said, settling beside him. We saved them. Couldn't have done it without you. You could have. You've done it before. He was quiet for a long moment. Not like this. Not with someone watching who actually cared whether I succeeded. Josiah. When Sarah went into labor with Emma, I was useless. His voice dropped. Stood in the corner and watched the midwife work. Felt helpless. Felt like there was nothing I could do to protect them. He swallowed hard. And then when the fire happened, I felt that same helplessness. Like I was watching my life burn and I couldn't stop it. You tried. You went into the fire for them. And failed. No. Bessie turned to face him. You didn't fail. You love them enough to risk everything. That's not failure. That's courage. It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like guilt. Maybe. She took his hand. But tonight you didn't fail. Tonight you helped bring a new life into the world. You gave Ruby and her daughter a chance. She squeezed his fingers. Maybe that doesn't erase the past. But maybe it doesn't have to. Maybe it just adds something new. He looked at her with eyes that held 6 years of grief and something else. Something that looked almost like healing. How do you do that? Do what? Make me believe things might actually be okay. I don't know, she smiled softly. Maybe because I'm starting to believe it too. He pulled her close, and they sat together as the sun rose, not speaking, just breathing, just existing in a moment that felt, for once, like it might be the beginning of something, instead of the end. Ruby woke around midday, groggy but smiling. She needs a name, she said, looking down at the baby nursing at her breast. I can't keep calling her she. What were you thinking? Bessie sat on the edge of the bed, marveling at how tiny the baby's fingers were. I was thinking about second chances. Ruby's voice was soft, about how I came up this mountain expecting to die, and instead I found a family. Ruby, I want to name her Hope. Ruby looked up, tears in her eyes, because that's what you all gave me, what this place gave me. Hope. Bessie felt her own tears fall. Hope. That's beautiful. Hope Callahan Johnson, Ruby smiled. If that's okay with you. I know we're not blood, but you're the closest thing to family I've got. Callahan? Bessie's voice cracked. You held my hand through the worst night of my life. You told me I could do it when I wanted to give up. You promised my daughter would love me. Ruby's fingers brushed the baby's cheek. That makes you her aunt, as far as I'm concerned. I'd be honored. Bessie leaned forward, pressing a kiss to baby Hope's forehead. Hello, little one. I'm your Aunt Bessie, and I promise I'm going to spoil you absolutely rotten. The cabin door opened, and Thomas entered, carrying a load of firewood. He stopped when he saw the three women together, something shifting in his expression. Bess, can I talk to you? Outside? She followed him onto the porch, worry knotting her stomach. What is it? I've been thinking. Thomas set down the wood and turned to face her. About what you said yesterday. About the restaurant you wanted to open. That was just a dream. Dreams don't have to stay dreams. He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. I told you I've been looking into Father's will. The lawyers found some irregularities. Nothing we can prove was fraud, but enough to call the whole thing into question. Bessie's heart began to pound. What are you saying? I'm saying Cordelia and her lawyers want to settle. Quietly, without a trial that might make uncomfortable questions public. Thomas pressed the envelope into her hands. This is your share, half of what Father left. She stared at the envelope like it might bite her. Thomas, I can't. You can. It's yours by right. His jaw tightened. I should have fought for you 2 years ago. I should have questioned everything Cordelia told me. Instead, I let her convince me you'd chosen to leave, and I tried to forget I have a sister. His voice broke. I can't change the past, but I can try to make the future better. Bessie opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a bank draft. The number on it made her legs go weak. This is enough to start your restaurant, enough to build a life on your own terms. Thomas smiled, but his eyes were wet. Enough to tell everyone who ever made you feel worthless that they were wrong. She threw her arms around him, sobbing into his shoulder like she was a little girl again. Thank you, Thomas, thank you. Don't thank me. It's what you're owed. He hugged her tightly. Just promise me you'll use it to be happy, really happy, not just surviving. I promise. That evening, Bessie showed Josiah the bank draft. His eyes widened, then narrowed with suspicion. This is real? Thomas says so. And you believe him? He's my brother. He came all this way to help me. He stood up to Hank Morrison and Dr. Price. Bessie folded the draft carefully. Yes, I believe him. Josiah was quiet for a long moment. So what now? You going back to Texas? What? No. She stared at him. Why would I go back to Texas? You've got money now, options. You don't need to stay on this mountain with a scarred hermit and 2 women the rest of the world thinks are fallen. Is that what you think? That I was only here because I had nowhere else to go? Weren't you? At first, maybe. Bessie moved closer to him, close enough to touch. But that changed. You know it changed. Things look different when you've got choices, Bessie. I don't want you to feel trapped. Trapped? She laughed, but there was an edge to it. You think I'd feel trapped here? On this mountain where no one's ever made me feel ashamed of my body? In this cabin where I'm actually useful? With you? Bessie, I have choices now. You're right about that. She took his hand, pressing it to her cheek. And I'm choosing to stay. I'm choosing this mountain. I'm choosing this strange little family we've built. She turned her head, pressing a kiss to his palm. I'm choosing you, if you'll have me. His breath caught. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. She met his eyes. I love you, Josiah Weston. I love your nightmares and your scars and your stubborn refusal to believe you deserve anything good. I love how you took in 2 strangers without question. I love how you held Ruby through the worst night of her life. I love that you see me, really see me, and you don't look away. Bessie, her name came out broken, raw. Now you can tell me you don't feel the same. You can tell me I'm being foolish. You can tell me all the reasons why this is a terrible idea. She smiled through her tears. But you can't tell me I don't know what I'm choosing, because I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He kissed her. Not the gentle, tentative kiss from the porch. This was something fiercer, something desperate. The kiss of a man who'd forgotten how to hope, finding it again in the most unexpected place. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Josiah rested his forehead against hers. I love you too. The words came out rough, like they'd been dragged from somewhere deep. I've loved you since you stood on my porch, scared half to death, and asked for help instead of running away. I've loved you since you held my hand through my nightmares. I've loved you since you faced down Hank Morrison like you were 10 feet tall. Why didn't you say anything? Because I didn't think I deserved it. He pulled back, his hands cupping her face. Because I thought if I loved someone again, I'd lose them too. Because every good thing in my life has turned to ash, and I couldn't bear to watch it happen to you. I'm not going to turn to ash. I know. He smiled, and it transformed his scarred face into something beautiful. I'm starting to know. A cry from inside the cabin interrupted them. Baby Hope, demanding attention. Duty calls, Bessie laughed. We should probably go back in before Ruby thinks we've abandoned her. In a minute. Josiah caught her hand. I need to ask you something first. What? Will you stay? Really stay? Not just through the winter, not just until things calm down. Will you build a life here with me? Yes. Will you let me court you proper, the way you deserve? Josiah, we're both too old for, will you? She looked at him, at this wounded, wonderful man who'd given her shelter when she had none, who'd seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself, who'd fought for her when no one else would. Yes, I'll let you court me, she grinned, but I warn you, I'm not easy to impress. Good, he kissed her forehead. I like a challenge. They went back inside together, hand in hand, to find Ruby teaching Thomas how to hold a baby, while Hope screamed her displeasure at the amateur handling. You've got to support her head. Ruby's voice was patient but exhausted. No, not like that, like this. She's so small, I'm afraid I'll break her. Babies are tougher than they look. Bessie took Hope from her brother's arms, settling the infant against her shoulder with practiced ease. The screaming stopped. See? She just wanted someone who knew what they were doing. Where'd you learn that? I used to help my mother with the neighbor's children. Bessie swayed gently, feeling Hope's tiny body relax against her. Before Cordelia. Before everything changed. Ruby smiled from the bed, exhausted but happy. You're a natural, Bess. I don't know about that. I do. Ruby's eyes found Josiah, who stood in the doorway, watching Bessie with an expression that made her blush. Some people are just meant to take care of others. It's in their bones. Hope gurgled and fell asleep against Bessie's shoulder. Outside, the mountain stood silent and strong, holding them all in its ancient embrace. Whatever came next, whatever challenges the world threw at them, they would face it together. A family forged, not by blood, but by something stronger, by choice, by hope, by love. 6 months changed everything. Bessie stood in the middle of what used to be the old feed store on Copper Ridge's Main Street, her hands covered in flour, her heart pounding with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. The sign outside read, Second Chance Kitchen, in letters Thomas had painted himself. Tomorrow was opening day. You're going to wear a hole in that floor. Ruby's voice came from the back, where she was nursing Hope, while simultaneously reviewing the menu Bessie had written out 3 times. Pacing won't make the bread rise faster. I know, I can't believe this is actually happening. Believe it. Ruby shifted Hope to her other breast. You've been working toward this for months. The building's ready, the kitchen's stocked. Half the town's already asking when they can get a table. Half the town wanted to drag me back to Hank Morrison's 6 months ago. People change, especially when they smell you cooking. Ruby grinned. I've seen grown men cry over your apple pie, Bess. You're going to be fine. The door opened, and Josiah entered, carrying a crate of vegetables from Mary Whitehorse's garden. He'd lost weight over the winter, but in a good way. The haunted look that had lived in his eyes when Bessie first met him had softened into something almost peaceful. Mary sends her regards. He set down the crate. Also says if you don't use enough rosemary in the lamb, she'll know, and she'll be disappointed. Tell Mary I've been cooking longer than she's been giving unsolicited advice. I'll tell her no such thing. I value my life. Josiah crossed to where Bessie stood and wrapped his arms around her from behind. How are you feeling? Terrified? Excited? Nauseated. She leaned back against his chest. All at the same time. That sounds about right. He pressed a kiss to her hair. For what it's worth, I think you're going to be magnificent. You have to say that. You're courting me. I'm courting you because it's true, not the other way around. The months since Hope's birth had been a whirlwind. Thomas had stayed through the winter, helping Bessie navigate the legal complexities of buying property as a woman in Wyoming territory. It had required creative paperwork and a sympathetic lawyer in Cheyenne, but they'd managed. Josiah had been by her side through all of it, teaching her more about herbal medicine, helping her design the restaurant kitchen, holding her through the nightmares that still came sometimes, memories of Hank's hands and Dr. Price's dismissal. They'd courted properly, just as he'd promised. Walks in the evening, conversations that lasted until dawn, a gradual weaving together of 2 broken lives into something stronger. Ruby had thrived on the mountain. Hope grew fat and happy, adored by everyone who met her. Mary Whitehorse had become a surrogate grandmother, visiting weekly with herbs and wisdom and pointed comments about when Josiah was going to make an honest woman of Bessie. Speaking of which, Josiah's voice rumbled against her back. There's something I want to ask you. Bessie's heart stuttered. Josiah, if you're about to propose in the middle of my restaurant the day before it opens, I swear I was going to ask if you want me to pick up more butter from the Hendersons. She elbowed him in the ribs. "You're terrible." "I know." But he was laughing, and the sound of it still made her chest ache with how much she loved him. A knock at the door interrupted whatever Ruby was about to say. Bessie's stomach dropped when she saw who stood on the other side of the glass. Dr. Edmund Price. "Don't open it." Ruby's voice went hard. "Whatever he wants, we don't need it." But Bessie was already moving toward the door. Something in the doctor's posture was different from the last time she'd seen him. Smaller, hunched, like a man carrying a weight he couldn't put down. She opened the door. "Miss Callahan." His voice was quiet, none of the pompous authority she remembered. "May I speak with you? Please." "Give me one reason why I should." "Because I owe you an apology." He met her eyes, and she saw something she'd never expected to see there. Shame. "Because I was wrong, and I need you to know it." Bessie stared at him for a long moment. Every instinct screamed at her to slam the door in his face. This man had dismissed her pain, had called her condition a moral failing, had ridden with a mob to drag her back to her abuser. But something else whispered that people could change, that she, of all people, should know that. 5 minutes. She stepped back. "Say what you came to say." Dr. Price entered slowly, his eyes taking in the restaurant, Ruby with the baby, Josiah standing protectively close to Bessie. "I heard about what you're doing here. Opening a business? Building something." He swallowed hard. "I also heard that you've been providing medical assistance to people in town. People I refused to treat. They needed help. I had knowledge. It seemed simple." "It's not simple. Nothing about medicine is simple." He removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "My wife died 4 years ago. Did you know that?" Bessie shook her head. "She was a large woman, like you. The most beautiful woman I ever knew." His voice cracked. "She had pain in her joints, swelling, all the things you described when you came to see me. I couldn't help her. I tried everything I knew, and I couldn't stop her suffering." The room had gone very still. "When she died, I told myself it was because of her weight, that if she just tried harder, been thinner, she might have lived." Dr. Price's eyes were wet. "It was easier than admitting I'd failed her. Easier than accepting that sometimes we can't save the people we love, no matter how hard we try." "So you took it out on me." Bessie's voice was flat. "On every woman who reminded you of her." "Yes." The word came out like a confession. "And I'm sorry. I'm so deeply, truly sorry. What I did to you was unforgivable. I know that. But I needed you to know that it was never about you. It was about my own grief and guilt and the terrible things we do when we can't face our own pain." Silence stretched between them. Ruby clutched Hope tighter. Josiah's hand found Bessie's, anchoring her. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I've been watching you these past months. Watching you help people I turned away. Watching you treat them with the dignity I denied them." He drew a shaky breath. "And I realized that you're doing what I should have done all along. What my wife would have wanted me to do." "What's that?" "Heal people. Really heal them. Not just their bodies, but their spirits, their sense of worth." He looked at her directly. "I can't undo what I did, but I can try to be different. And I wanted you to know that you're part of why I'm trying." Bessie didn't know what to say. This wasn't the man who'd dismissed her. This was someone broken by the same kind of grief that had nearly destroyed Josiah. Someone trying, however clumsily, to find his way back to humanity. "I don't forgive you." The words came out quiet but firm. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did caused real harm." "I know. But I appreciate you telling me." She released Josiah's hand and stepped toward the doctor. And I think if you meant what you said about being different, you should prove it. How? There's a girl in town, Sarah Chen. Her family runs the laundry. She's been having stomach pains for weeks. Her parents are too afraid to bring her to you because they don't think you'll help them. Dr. Price flinched. Go to them. Treat their daughter. Don't charge them a cent. Bessie's voice hardened. And when you're done, send anyone you can't or won't help to me. I'll do what I can. That's not proper medical practice. No, it's not. It's better. She moved to the door and opened it. Your 5 minutes are up, Dr. Price. I have a restaurant to open. He walked past her, pausing at the threshold. For what it's worth, Miss Callahan, I think your restaurant is going to be extraordinary. Just like you. Then he was gone. Ruby let out a breath she'd clearly been holding. Well, that was unexpected. He's trying. Josiah's voice was thoughtful. I'm not saying it excuses anything, but he's trying. Maybe. Bessie closed the door and leaned against it. Or maybe he's just looking for absolution. Either way, I meant what I said. I don't forgive him. You don't have to, Ruby smiled. But you gave him a chance to do better. That's more than most people would. Opening day arrived with the kind of perfect spring weather that made Bessie suspicious. Nothing in her life had ever gone this smoothly. Something had to go wrong. By noon, the restaurant was full. By 2 o'clock, there was a line out the door. By 5, Bessie had run out of apple pie and had to send Thomas to the market for more supplies, while she frantically improvised a new dessert. This is insane. She stood in the kitchen, sweat dripping down her face, her feet screaming after hours of standing. There's too many people. I can't keep up. Yes, you can. Ruby appeared beside her, Hope strapped to her chest in a carrier Mary had made. What do you need? Another set of hands. A larger kitchen. A miracle. Fresh out of miracles, but I can chop vegetables. Ruby handed Hope to Josiah, who'd been serving tables like he'd done it his whole life. Tell me what to do. They worked side by side, Ruby taking direction, Bessie cooking like she was possessed. The kitchen became a dance, a rhythm, a conversation without words, and somewhere in the chaos, Bessie realized she was happy. Not just surviving, not just coping, actually, genuinely happy. The restaurant closed at 9, but Bessie didn't stop moving until nearly midnight. Cleaning, organizing, preparing for tomorrow. When she finally collapsed into a chair, her whole body ached in the best possible way. You did it, Josiah sat across from her, looking as exhausted as she felt. First day in the books. We did it. I couldn't have managed without you and Ruby. Nah, you would have found a way. He reached across the table, taking her hand. You always do. Josiah. She looked at their intertwined fingers. Earlier, when you joked about proposing. Who says I was joking? Her head snapped up. He was pulling something from his pocket. A small box, worn with age. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it, revealing a simple gold band set with a tiny diamond. This was my mother's. His voice was rough. She gave it to me before she died. Told me to save it for someone worthy. For years I thought that person didn't exist, that I'd lost my chance at love when I lost Sarah. He looked at her, and his eyes were bright with tears. Then you climbed my mountain, scared and sick, and braver than anyone I'd ever met. And everything changed. Josiah, I know I'm not what you dreamed of. I've got scars and nightmares and a past that still haunts me. But I love you, Bessie May Callahan. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you never give up on anyone, even people who've given up on themselves. He slid out of his chair, kneeling before her. Will you marry me? Bessie's vision blurred with tears. Yes. God, yes, of course yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. Then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back. And Ruby was cheering from the doorway, where she'd clearly been eavesdropping. And Hope was crying because all the noise had woken her up. And it was chaos, and it was perfect, and it was everything Bessie had never dared to dream. "About time!" Ruby rushed in to hug them both. "Mary's going to be insufferable. She's been predicting this for months." "Mary predicts everything." Josiah didn't let go of Bessie's hand. "Doesn't mean she's always right." "She was right about us." Bessie leaned into him. "She was right about a lot of things." The wedding took place 3 weeks later, on a Sunday morning when the restaurant was closed and the whole town seemed to hold its breath. They held it on the mountain, outside Josiah's cabin, with wildflowers blooming and birds singing, and the kind of sky that made you believe in God, even if you weren't sure you did. Mary Whitehorse performed the ceremony, using words from her tradition that spoke of 2 rivers joining, 2 paths becoming one. Thomas stood beside Josiah as his best man, looking proud and slightly overwhelmed. Ruby stood beside Bessie, Hope in her arms, tears streaming down her face. "I was there when you climbed this mountain," Ruby whispered, just before the ceremony began. "I was there when you were so scared you could barely breathe. Look at you now." "Look at us now." Bessie squeezed her hand. "Both of us. We survived, Ruby. We more than survived." "Yeah," Ruby smiled through her tears. "I reckon we did." The ceremony was simple. Vows spoken from the heart, not memorized from a book. When Josiah promised to love her through sickness and health, through good times and bad, through all the years they had left, Bessie believed him. When she made the same promise, she meant every word. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Mary's voice carried across the clearing. "You may kiss your bride." Josiah pulled her close, and the kiss was everything their first kiss hadn't been. Confident. Sure. The kiss of 2 people who'd found each other against all odds, and refused to let go. The celebration afterward was small, but joyful. People from town had made the climb up the mountain, bringing food and gifts and goodwill. Even Dr. Price attended, standing awkwardly at the edge of the gathering until Bessie went to him. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for inviting me." He looked at her with something like wonder. "I heard you've been teaching Ruby about medicine, that she's becoming quite skilled." "She's got a gift for it. Same way I've got a gift for cooking." Bessie smiled. "We use what we have." "Yes." Dr. Price nodded slowly. "Yes, I suppose we do." As evening fell and the guests began to leave, Bessie found herself standing at the edge of the clearing, looking out at the valley below. Somewhere down there was Copper Ridge, the town that had rejected her, judged her, tried to drag her back to abuse. The same town that now lined up for her cooking, that brought their children to Ruby for treatment when they couldn't afford the doctor, that had watched her marry the man they'd once called crazy and celebrated with genuine joy. "What are you thinking?" Josiah's arms wrapped around her from behind. "About how different everything looks from up here." She leaned back against him. "About how much has changed." "Good changes?" "The best changes." She turned in his arms, looking up at his scarred face, at the eyes that had seen so much pain, and still found room for love. "I climbed this mountain wanting to disappear. I found a life instead." "We found each other." He kissed her forehead. "That's what matters." Ruby appeared, Hope asleep on her shoulder. "We're heading back to the cabin. Give you 2 some privacy." She winked. "Don't do anything I wouldn't do." "That doesn't rule out much, Ruby." "I know." Ruby laughed and walked away, her silhouette merging with the twilight. Bessie and Josiah stood together in the fading light, husband and wife, survivors, healers in their own way. The mountain held them, and the sky stretched endless above, and for once, the future didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like a promise. 1 year later, Bessie stood in her restaurant's kitchen, watching the dinner rush with a satisfaction that still surprised her. The Second Chance Kitchen had become the most popular establishment in Copper Ridge. People traveled from neighboring towns just to taste her cooking. But that wasn't what made her proud. What made her proud was the young woman working beside her, a girl named Emma, whose mother had died and whose father had given up. Emma had come to the restaurant looking for work and found a family instead, just like Bessie had found one on the mountain. What made her proud was Ruby, who'd become the closest thing Copper Ridge had to a midwife, helping women through childbirth with skill and compassion. Ruby, who'd been called a whore and worthless, and was now respected throughout the territory. What made her proud was Hope, now a toddler with her mother's red hair, and a personality that filled every room she entered. Hope, who would grow up knowing she was loved, who would never question her worth the way her mother once had. "Mrs. Weston?" Emma's voice cut through her thoughts. "Table 4 is asking for more biscuits." "Then give them more biscuits," Bessie smiled. "And Emma, call me Bessie. We're family here." Emma beamed and hurried off with a fresh basket. The kitchen door swung open, and Josiah entered, his face flushed from the cold outside. He'd spent the day on the mountain, tending to a sick horse at a neighboring ranch. He still healed, still helped, still did what Mary Whitehorse had taught him to do all those years ago. "How's business?" He stole a biscuit from the basket. "Busy. Always busy." Bessie swatted his hand. "Those are for customers." "I am a customer. I'm married to the owner." "That makes you staff. Staff doesn't get free biscuits." He grinned and kissed her cheek. Worth it anyway. Later that night, after the restaurant had closed, and Emma had gone home, and Ruby had taken Hope up to the cabin, Bessie and Josiah sat on the porch of what was now their home in town. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Bessie asked, her hand resting on her stomach. On the small life growing there, the one she hadn't told him about yet. Every day, Josiah's arm tightened around her. "Every day I think about what would have happened if you hadn't climbed that mountain, if you'd given up, if I'd turned you away." "Would you have? Turned me away?" "No," he said it without hesitation. "I would have helped you no matter what. That's not who I am." "I know." She took his hand and moved it to her belly. "And that's why I know you're going to be a wonderful father." He froze. "Bessie, are you—" "3 months along. Mary confirmed it last week." She looked up at him, suddenly nervous. "I know we didn't plan this. I know you've already lost. I know it might be hard." "Hard?" His voice cracked. "Bessie, this is everything." He pulled her into his arms, and she felt him shaking, crying. The man who'd lost a wife and daughter to fire, who'd spent 6 years convinced he'd never have another chance, crying because she'd given him hope again. "I'm scared." The admission came out small. "What if something goes wrong? What if I'm not—" "Then we face it together." He pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. "Whatever happens, whatever comes, we face it together. That's what family does." Family. The word echoed through her, filling all the empty spaces that years of shame and rejection had carved out. She thought about her mother, who'd taught her to cook, about her father, who'd loved her even when he didn't know how to show it, about Thomas, who'd come back for her when she'd given up hope, about Ruby and Hope and Mary and everyone else who'd become part of her life on this mountain. She thought about the woman she'd been when she climbed that trail, sick, scared, convinced she was worth less than nothing. And she thought about the woman she was now, a wife, a business owner,